On June 3, 2019, in the early evening hours, Officer Brad Coleman, 37, of the Springfield Police Department in Ohio, discharged his firearm in the parking lot of Riverbend Grocery on West Fulton Street. The rounds struck Marcus Washington, 42, a lifelong resident of the city. Washington collapsed near his vehicle, holding a grocery bag. He was pronounced dead minutes later by emergency personnel. Marcus Washington had been employed for 12 years at Clark Industrial, a mid-sized factory producing machine components. He worked as a mechanic on the assembly line and was considered reliable by supervisors, rarely absent and known for completing overtime when required. Washington lived with his only son, Damon, 19, who was enrolled in general studies at the local community college and worked part-time in a bookstore. After his wife's death from cancer in 2012, Marcus assumed full responsibility for raising Damon. At the same time, Officer Coleman was conducting routine patrol in the western sector of the city. Approximately half an hour earlier, dispatch had circulated information regarding a reported car theft. The description provided was brief: black male, dark clothing, possibly armed. Coleman later wrote that he observed Washington outside a vehicle that, in his assessment, corresponded to the alert. He parked his patrol unit, exited with his weapon already drawn, and directed commands toward Washington. Witnesses present in the parking lot consistently reported hearing Coleman shout for Washington to raise his hands. They also recalled Washington responding that he was carrying only food. Several witnesses noted that he lifted the grocery bag above shoulder height to demonstrate. The interval between this action and the shots was short. None of the witnesses saw a weapon in Washington's hands. Coleman fired 3 rounds from his Glock 22 pistol. Ballistic analysis confirmed that all bullets struck Washington in the chest area at close range. Washington immediately fell to the ground. The grocery bag dropped beside him, spilling its contents. Store staff later identified the bag and items as consistent with the purchases minutes earlier. Immediately after the discharge, Coleman transmitted a call to dispatch, reporting, "Suspect attacked me, used deadly force." Backup officers arrived within minutes. They secured the lot with yellow tape, moved bystanders away, and restricted access to vehicles. Paramedics attempted to assess Washington, but declared him deceased on scene. Several civilian statements were collected. Sandra Lopez, 53, employed as a cashier inside the store, gave a written statement. The officer was yelling. The man looked scared. He had a bag. I never saw a weapon. Another account came from Thomas Grant, 46, who was placing groceries in his truck. The officer shouted, the man raised something, but it was just a bag. Then 3 shots. Additional witnesses confirmed that Washington had not advanced toward Coleman. At his apartment 4 blocks away, Damon Washington received a phone call from neighbor Robert Young, 61, who told him his father had been shot near the store. Damon immediately ran to the site. When he arrived, police had already restricted the area. He saw his father's body covered with a sheet near the family's Ford Taurus. Coleman was positioned beside his patrol unit, writing in a notepad. Witnesses observed Damon kneeling near the tape, attempting to reach his father's body before being guided away by officers. During evidence processing, investigators photographed the scene from multiple angles. They documented shell casings, the grocery bag, spilled items, and the position of Washington's body relative to his vehicle. The movie ticket was removed from his pocket and logged as Exhibit 14. No weapon was recovered from Washington's person, vehicle, or immediate surroundings. At approximately 9 o'clock, the coroner's office transported the body for autopsy. The official report later recorded cause of death as 3 gunshot wounds to the chest, manner of death homicide by firearm. Coleman was taken to the police station for routine questioning and placed on administrative leave pending investigation. On the day of the incident, Washington left work and stopped at Riverbend Grocery to purchase snacks before attending the scheduled film. Receipts confirmed he bought microwave popcorn and soda. These items were recovered at the scene after the shooting. The ticket for the 7:20 p.m. showing at Grandview Theater, later logged into evidence, further confirmed his plans for the evening. Officer Brad Coleman, 37, assigned to patrol in the same district, was on duty that evening. Coleman had joined the Springfield Police Department in 2006 and had served in various divisions, including traffic enforcement and neighborhood patrol. That evening, he had been monitoring reports related to a stolen vehicle. This sequence was not the first time Washington's path intersected indirectly with Coleman. 2 months prior, in early April 2019, Washington had been working a night shift at the factory. During a break, he reportedly observed an unusual event through the shop window facing the warehouse docks. According to notes found later among his personal effects, Washington saw Coleman and another uniformed officer meeting 2 men in civilian clothing. Packages, described in his notes as small and white, were transferred between the groups. Washington wrote down the patrol car number involved in the exchange on a slip of paper. The paper was discovered after his death inside a drawer in his apartment. Damon later presented it to investigators. The handwriting matched Marcus Washington's known samples, according to a preliminary analysis. No record exists that Washington ever reported the observation to authorities. Interviews with family members clarified why Washington kept the information private. He had a conviction for marijuana possession in his early 20s, dating back more than 2 decades. Though it carried no current legal consequences, Washington had expressed concern that police contact could be used against him. Damon told investigators, "My father didn't want to risk bringing trouble into our lives. He always said the past could be used to discredit him." As a result, Washington never disclosed the incident at the docks, except by keeping the patrol car number written on the slip. Following the death of Marcus Washington on June 3, 2019, the Springfield Police Department initiated an internal review of Officer Brad Coleman's actions. The official statement released by the department described Coleman as acting in accordance with established protocol for confronting a potentially armed suspect. The statement asserted that Washington matched the description of a man sought for a recent vehicle theft, and that Coleman responded to a perceived threat in the parking lot. The department acknowledged the absence of direct video evidence. Coleman's assigned body camera was reported as malfunctioning at the time of the incident. Maintenance logs indicated prior technical issues, though no replacement had been made before June 3. Cameras worn by other officers who arrived after the shooting did not capture the gunfire itself. Surveillance cameras mounted on the exterior of Riverbend Grocery were confirmed inactive due to scheduled maintenance on the day of the incident. The lack of visual records left witness testimony as the primary source for reconstructing the event. Damon Washington, using funds from a modest life insurance policy held by his father, retained attorney Linda Barrett, 44, who specialized in civil rights cases. Barrett's initial legal filings highlighted inconsistencies between Coleman's account and the statements of multiple witnesses. Within days, 3 bystanders signed affidavits confirming that Marcus Washington had been unarmed and holding only groceries at the time he was shot. However, within a week, 2 of those witnesses formally revised their statements. Their new accounts were less definitive, claiming uncertainty about what Washington held or how quickly events unfolded. The 3rd witness, who had maintained his version of events, relocated abruptly to another state. Attempts to contact him after his move were unsuccessful. As a result, the case presented to the grand jury in Clark County rested on incomplete and conflicting evidence. The grand jury reviewed the matter in late June 2019. After several sessions, jurors declined to issue an indictment against Coleman. The official reason cited was insufficient evidence to prove criminal liability beyond reasonable doubt. During this period, Damon continued organizing his father's personal belongings. In a drawer, he found a slip of paper containing a handwritten patrol car number and a date. Damon recognized his father's writing and linked it to a story Marcus had once mentioned about witnessing unusual activity near the factory docks. The note raised the possibility that his father had seen Coleman involved in off-duty dealings that were not part of regular police work. Damon began to consider that his father's death might not have been entirely coincidental. Uncertain how to proceed, Damon researched Coleman's career and movements, gathering publicly available information. He tracked patterns of patrol routes, compiled details about Coleman's family, and noted the officer's reputation inside the department. Despite these efforts, Damon hesitated to take direct action. In conversations with friends, he expressed conflict. Pursuing retaliation would make him no different from the man he believed responsible for his father's death. For more than 2 weeks, he struggled with this decision, at times abandoning the idea of revenge altogether. Parallel to these developments, the city entered negotiations with Attorney Barrett. In August 2019, the city reached a settlement agreement with Damon, Washington, in the amount of $1.8 million. The settlement included no admission of wrongdoing by the police department or the city administration. The payment was presented as a means to resolve potential civil claims and avoid prolonged litigation. Damon accepted the agreement, though the decision did not resolve his personal doubts about justice. By September 2019, Coleman returned to active duty. The internal investigation concluded that he had acted within the parameters of policy based on the information available at the time. Coleman resumed patrol assignments and appeared in routine departmental photographs, including public outreach events. Colleagues described him as composed, though less talkative than before. For Damon, Coleman's return to duty intensified his internal conflict. He saw images of the officer with his wife and 2 young children, projecting the appearance of a stable family life. Damon considered the consequences of taking action against Coleman, recognizing that the officer's family would suffer loss similar to his own. Nevertheless, the recurring memory of his father's final moments and the unanswered questions about the note found in the drawer kept the thought of retaliation alive. By the close of 2019, the official record stood as follows: no criminal charges against Coleman, a civil settlement paid to Washington's son, and the officer reinstated to duty. For Damon, however, the discovery of the note and the unresolved circumstances surrounding the shooting created an enduring conflict between acceptance and the pursuit of his own form of justice. In October 2019, several weeks after the conclusion of civil proceedings, Damon, Washington began monitoring Officer Brad Coleman's daily habits. Using his own vehicle, a 2004 Chevrolet Impala, Damon followed Coleman's patrol routes and off-duty movements. Over the course of 4 weeks, he established a pattern. On Thursday evenings, Coleman visited a sports bar on the north side of Springfield. The choice of day held significance for Damon, as Thursday was the day his father was killed, and also the evening reserved for their family movie tradition. By early November, Damon acquired a firearm through a private sale. Records later presented in court showed that the weapon, a 9mm pistol, was purchased without a background check from an acquaintance. Damon told investigators that his intention from that point was to carry out retaliation on November 15th, the date he selected for what he considered a symbolic act. On November 14th, Coleman's colleague Officer Ryan Phillips noticed a vehicle parked near Coleman's residence. Phillips recorded the license plate and informed Coleman the next morning that someone might be monitoring him. Coleman acknowledged the warning but continued with his usual schedule. He later told a coworker that he believed the observation was coincidental and did not report it formally. Despite varying his routes briefly, Coleman returned to his routine, including his regular Thursday evening stop at the sports bar. On November 15th, Damon drove to the parking lot of the establishment and waited. Shortly before 8 o'clock, a uniformed officer arrived in a similar vehicle. Damon, positioned at a distance, initially believed it was Coleman and prepared to act. Closer inspection revealed the officer was Kyle Morrison, another member of the department with a similar build. Damon lowered his weapon, recognizing the mistake at the last moment. Morrison entered the bar briefly, then departed, unaware of the potential threat. Damon later admitted to investigators that this incident caused him to reconsider, realizing he had come close to killing an uninvolved person. Approximately 30 minutes later, Coleman arrived in his own car. Damon approached him near the entrance to the parking lot. The subsequent encounter was reconstructed from Damon's statement, witness accounts, and video recordings from nearby security cameras that, unlike those at the grocery months earlier, were functioning. According to the record, Damon confronted Coleman directly and stated, "Officer Coleman, I know what my father saw at the warehouses 2 months ago. I want to make a deal." Coleman's body language initially suggested tension, but he appeared to relax when he interpreted the statement as a demand for money. Witnesses described Coleman speaking in a calm voice, saying words to the effect of, "Smart boy. How much do you want for silence?" He mentioned possible sums, suggesting $50,000 or $100,000. He also remarked that Damon's father would be proud of his ability to turn a personal loss into opportunity. At that point, Damon replied, "I need your life." He produced the firearm from his jacket. Coleman reached for his own service weapon. But security video confirmed Damon fired first. 4 shots struck Coleman in the torso, causing him to collapse beside his vehicle. Emergency services were called, but Coleman was pronounced dead on arrival. Immediately after the shooting, Damon dialed 911 and reported the incident as self-defense. Responding officers secured the scene. Video recordings were reviewed, showing Coleman moving his hand toward his holster immediately before the shots were fired. This evidence created ambiguity about whether Coleman posed an imminent threat at the moment Damon acted. A grand jury convened in December 2019. After reviewing testimony and video material, jurors concluded that Damon had acted in partial self-defense, but had also initiated the confrontation with premeditation. On that basis, the panel issued an indictment for second-degree murder rather than acquittal. The trial took place in March 2020. Damon's defense argued that the shooting was a direct response to the threat presented by Coleman's attempt to draw his weapon. The prosecution emphasized Damon's surveillance of Coleman, the firearm purchase, and his expressed intent to act on November 15. After deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on the charge of second-degree murder. Damon was sentenced to 15 years in state prison. Following the conviction, attorneys from other jurisdictions contacted Damon's legal team, citing parallels with cases involving disputed use of force by police officers. Several advocacy groups initiated reviews of regional patterns of police conduct, including the unresolved circumstances surrounding Washington's original shooting and the discovery of the patrol car number note. Coleman's mother publicly demanded a life sentence for Damon, characterizing his actions as calculated murder. Others, including some community members, argued that Damon's act represented a form of justice in the absence of institutional accountability. Officially, the case closed with the conviction, but its broader implications continued to draw scrutiny from investigators and legal professionals examining patterns of police conduct in the area. Damon arrives at Millfield State Prison in Texas in December. He's placed in a cell with Vince Torres, convicted of armed robbery, serving 8 years. Torres immediately recognizes him from the news, says with respect, "You're the guy who took down that cop for your father. People like you are respected here." A month later, inmate Reggie Clark approaches Damon, a former detective convicted of corruption. Clark tells him, "Your story made waves. You know that cop you killed wasn't working alone? His partner Phillips is still out there, continuing Coleman's business." Damon realizes his father's death was part of something bigger. Damon begins receiving letters from families of police brutality victims across the country. His lawyer brings him a folder with new cases from 3 states. All cases are connected to officers who trained at the same center as Coleman.